Hey photographer, Jessica Whitaker here, and in today's photography tutorial, I am going to be doing a lens comparison of the 50mm 1.8, the 50mm 1.4, and the 50mm 1.2 from Canon. I am so excited to finally have this video up on YouTube because I have been thinking about this topic for the past year, honestly. I recently was able to purchase the 50mm 1.2 used, and we're going to talk about that process and why I even have all three of these lenses in my possession in a moment. But this whole video is for those who want the most practical perspective and easy to understand explanation of these differences and the obvious differences. If you want all of the technical specs between these lenses, I will have their listings linked down in the description box below so that you can read and compare those elements for yourself. We will be going over the specs of these lenses, of course, a bit, but this is more for that photographer who is either thinking to upgrade from the 1.8 to the 4 or the 2, or for somebody who is just about to dive into it and they don't know what one to go with. This video is for you. Before we get into the video, I do want to thank our sponsor for today, KEH Camera, for sponsoring this video and for gifting us the use of the 1.8 from Canon lens. KEH Camera is one of the world's largest online resellers of digital and film equipment. I have purchased from KEH personally before I was even partnered with them, and I was really impressed with how quickly my product came. So I had a Minolta X370 film camera that ended up breaking at the airport and I needed a replacement, but I didn't know where to go because in New York City, a lot of film gear is really marked up because it's something that is so trendy right now. So I searched online, I found KEH, and I was really surprised how quickly, like within a week, I received the camera body and how affordable it was. My Minolta was about $40 to replace with an entire new body, and I'm really excited that I have the opportunity to be partnered with them in this video and within videos in the past. So I'm going to link KEH down below. It's very easy to buy and to sell through their website. I highly recommend them. I'm gonna have them linked down below. To begin, we're gonna just start right with the price points of all three of these lenses. Now, these prices are pulled up in the average that is being sold on Google, so across a few different retailers. This is for new. The 1.8 from Canon, this little guy is nicknamed the Nifty 50, and you can see there's a little gold sticker on there. That's the quality seal from KEH. If you were to go and buy this guy new, it would be $125. Now, the next lens in the lineup is the 50mm 1.4. This lens is about $300, so there is about a $175 price difference between the 1.8 and the 1.4. Last in the lineup, we have the 50mm 1.2, and isn't it crazy how different they all look? A 50mm 1.2, if you were to buy it new, is about $1,300, so $1,300. That's quite a big price jump, right? If the 50mm 1.4 is $300 about, and then the 50mm 1.2 is $1,300, that's $1,000 difference between these two lenses, and there's no in between for the 1.4 or the 1.2 because it's numerical by even numbers. For those who are just getting started in photography, you probably already know the basics of aperture, but I want to make one thing clear. The 1.8, the 1.4, and the 1.2. The numbers are getting smaller, but the lens is getting wider. So the 1.2 is the widest aperture out of these three options, and it will let in the most light, whereas the 1.8 is the smallest in the lineup of these three. The aperture is smaller with the 1.8, even though the number is greater. So my assistant Kelsey and I went out and shot some various portraits in a few different lighting situations with all three of these lenses, and I'm going to show that to you shortly. And when you're looking at these images, I want you to pay attention to a few different factors. I want you to look at the sharpness, the distortion, and also the background, the bokeh, and the compression, the lens flare of these images. Now, we did do some portraits where we were out during golden hour and the sun was directly behind Kelsey. I wanted to test out the sun flare, the lens flare with these different lenses. And the 1.8 was the most deliberate lens flare. You could really see all of the rays from the sun. It was a little bit more streaky, for lack of a better word. The 1.4 was fine, it was much smoother, but the 1.2 was where it was buttery, silky smooth. You didn't get much of the rays of sun, but for the most part, it was very angelic, very silky, very smooth, and blended in with the rest of the background. It's very soft. The 1.8, it's not that it wasn't soft, it's that it was more deliberate and you could see more of the rays of sun. It didn't look as smooth. Now we're gonna move into the focusing of these lenses and then also the sharpness, kind of like a 2-in-1. So all of these lenses are very easy to focus with in autofocus. Manual is where it's gonna get a little bit more finicky, especially when you're shooting as open at 1.2, and depending on the lighting situation. So focus when it's golden hour and the sun is directly behind the subject and it's all backlit and beautiful, that's going to be more difficult to focus than something like full shade or even direct sunlight, naturally, as that is the case with almost all lenses. But manual focus is where it's going to be a little bit more tricky to nail, because when you're shooting something so wide open at 1.2, you have to make sure you have a really steady hand. Now 1.8 and 1.4 are both quite simple on manual focus. I have done that myself with all three of these, but you don't have a problem with 1.4 or 8. Autofocus is great. Now, one thing that's interesting about the 1.8 versus the 1.4 or the 1.2, the focus ring does actually protrude out of the camera. You can actually hear it trying to focus on the subject. That is something interesting to keep in mind. So I'm going to play a little clip of that to show you. When it comes to what lens is the sharpest, I would definitely say that the 1.8, in my opinion, is the sharpest lens. That is just because we are shooting a little bit more close. Now the 1.4 is, in my opinion, comes close to the 1.8. I would definitely say the 1.8 lens is the sharpest, but the quality is significantly less than the 1.4 at the end result. But that's all in camera. You can still do adjustments slightly in post later when you're editing. Again, I do want to direct your attention to the description box, where I'm going to link all three listings for these different lenses with the specs within the listings. Now I want to move into the glass, the materials, and also the weight of these lenses. So let's start out with the weight, and I have my notes here. The 1.8 is 5.6 ounces, so it's the lightest. It's also the smallest. The 1.4 is 10 ounces, so it's double the weight of the 1.8. And the 1.2 is about a pound. So there is a significant weight difference with all these lenses, as well as the dimensions. Now this to me isn't a pro or a con, and just because something's heavy doesn't mean that it's better quality, but in this instance, that is the case. The materials used on the 1.2 for the outer body, like the shell of it, are a better grade than the 1.8. The 1.8 is plastic. Let me just put it at that. All of these lenses do have Canon's Super Spectra coating, which this coating is Canon's form of multi-level, multi-layered, anti-reflective glass coating. Now that we know all of the variety within these three lenses, we know the differences between them, let's talk about the final thoughts. I'm going to just share my personal opinion, and you can form your own. I really encourage you to. You can ask for other perspectives in the Build and Bloom Facebook group, which is my free online photography Facebook group. It's actually one of Facebook's most highly engaged photography communities, and it's full of 60,000 kind, encouraging photographers. So I honestly encourage any of you who are watching this video to join down below, and you can ask people their opinion too on the group, or you can also talk about it in the comments, because I'm curious to know what lens you prefer. I'm going to share my opinion though, and this is the advice I would give to somebody starting out in photography, and then I'll also share for those who are looking to maybe upgrade. So for those who are shopping for their first 50mm lens, or maybe this is one of the first lenses in your collection and you're wondering which of the three to go with, and let's say you are on a budget, the 1.4 is what I would encourage you to go with. That extra stop does make a significant difference when it comes to letting more light in these low lighting situations. There's a $175 difference between the 1.8 and the 1.4, and I really do think that it is worth to save and to hold out to invest in the 1.4 over the 1.8. Whether that means you're gonna have to pick up a few extra shifts, bust out a few mini sessions, or do some more babysitting, I really do believe that the 1.4 is worth that extra $175 in the long run. Now, if you have shot with the 1.8 or the 1.4 for a few years or for a while now, and you're looking to upgrade, you want to have a 1.2 in your collection. I would honestly advise you to skip the 50mm 1.2 and get an 85mm 1.2. Then you have a variety of focal lengths, but then you also can still get that nice creamy open aperture, but you're not duplicating your focal lengths. I have a video where I compare the 50mm to an 85, and actually I also throw in the 35, so it's a prime lens comparison of 35, 50, and 85mm lenses. It's also with KEH, and I'll have that linked down below so you can see the differences, but that is what I would honestly encourage you to do. The only reason why I have the 50mm 1.4 and the 50mm 1.2 is a long-winded answer, but let's get into it. I shot with the 50mm 1.4 for years, like 5 years, and it finally gave up the gun. It got really water damaged, and all of these lenses are weather sealed from Canon, but there's only so much rain that they really can take. And in Seattle growing up, I would shoot in the rain like all the time because they're durable, but after 5 years, the focusing just got way too off. It really damaged the lens. When this video is being filmed, I've owned the 50mm 1.2 for maybe about 6 months, and I had been shooting with a 35mm focal length, and I have loved that. It's the Sigma Art, which is razor sharp. It's a great lens, but I really wanted to reintroduce the 50mm for my portraits because the 50 is superior with portraits than a 35. It doesn't distort. It's so good. So I wanted to reintroduce the 50mm. I saw on Facebook one of my friends was selling the 50mm 1.2, and I immediately messaged them like 3 minutes after the listing went up, and I bought it from them. I bought it used. It was a great deal. I have fallen in love with it, and I really do love the 1.2. It makes a significant difference, but it is very expensive. If you bought it new, you're looking about $1,300, and if you bought it used on something like KEH, you can get a better deal. But I would say that if you already have the 51.4 and you love that, I would say go for an 85 1.2. I'm not discouraging people from buying the 1.2 50mm. It's a beautiful, it's my favorite focal length. I love it, I love it, I love it. I'm just coming from this mindset of it is expensive, but is it worth the investment? That's up to you and your business. I personally think it was worth the investment for me and my business, but I also was in a unique situation where I had already experienced the 1.4 for so long, and it was kind of time for me to level up that game a little bit. If you're interested in a tutorial with these 3 lenses, but in night photography or really, really low light like dusk, let me know in the comments below, because I think that would be really fun to show the differences with the low light and how much of a difference the 3 make. I think that could be kind of interesting, so let me know in a comment down below if you would like that. Touch on the 1.8 and if that would be a good purchase or not. I do think that the 1.8, the nifty 50, has its time and its place, and I think that if you are just starting out in photography, or if you've had your camera but the kit lens for a few years and you're ready to take a step, but you're not wanting to invest too much money into your photography business yet, maybe this is something that you do as a hobby, maybe this is something that you just, use to photograph your kids and your family and your personal travels, then I think the 1.8 50mm is great for you. You're not planning to blow these up into big canvas prints. I think that that is a great circumstance to use the 1.8, or if you are really on a budget. But if you are wanting to kind of grow with your gear, I would say the 1.4 50 millimeter is worth holding out to save up for. That's my comparison for the 50 millimeter 1.8, 1.4, and 1.2. I hope that this video helped you out and gave you some direction and idea for what you might want to upgrade to or invest in. I believe in you and your business, and that's why I'm here every single week teaching to you for free here on YouTube. So if you want to be the first to know when a new photography tutorial for your business comes up, be sure to hit subscribe. If you like my approach to teaching from this practical perspective, then you just might love my online photography workshop, The Business Behind Photography, how to market and manage your dream ideal clients in your own backyard. I teach from A to Z how to build a sustainable photography business where you can truly thrive in your community and you can expand. I teach in depth on things like pricing, customer service, client communication, branding, website, all from the perspective of, look, not all of us want to do photography full time. Some of us just want to keep it as a hobby, but something that we can make a little bit more money in than just $50 a session. Or maybe this is a business that you want to grow into, but it doesn't mean that you can't start expanding now. I give you all the resources and tools that you need in my online photography workshop, so definitely check that out, linked below, or at jessicawhitaker.co/workshop, and you can see all the lessons included in the program. It's all online, 6.5 hours. There's worksheets, downloads, templates, and more, and it's all in video format, the teachings themselves. I believe in you and your business, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.